Good afternoon. I am Senator Gary Daniels from District 11. Today, we will be holding a meeting of the Senate Finance Committee. Before we get started, I'll read through a checklist to ensure that the meeting we are holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As chair of the Senate Finance Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which is authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone, with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee and selected legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously watch and or listen to the meeting on Zoom or YouTube and via phone by following the directions and links provided on the General Court website. We have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting in the Senate calendar. We are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please email remotesenate, that's one word, at leg.state.nh.us or call 603-271-6931. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, it will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Finally, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states his or her presence, please also state where you are and if anyone else is in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. I will call the roll. Senator Rosenwald.
Hello, Senator Cindy Rosenwald, District 13. I am in the Senate chamber with all of you.
Senator Reagan. Senator D'Alessandro. Senator Hennessy.
Good afternoon, Erin Hennessy from Littleton. I am in the Senate chamber.
Senator Morse.
Senator Chuck Morse in the Senate chamber.
Senator Guider is in transit, not present at this time. I am Senator Gary Daniels from Milford, and I am in the Senate chambers. At this time, I would invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation. Our first presentation this afternoon is with the New Hampshire Employment Security. And I would welcome the commissioner and would ask those that are presenting this afternoon if they would please state their name and position for the records.
Good afternoon,
Good
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman and committee members. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, if you speak up, we can.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. For the record, George Kapatis, Commissioner of Employment Security, and I'm at my office by myself. So I just wanted to go over a few things. As far as the department receives no general funds, and a majority of its federal matching funds are from USDOL. The department also receives supplemental funding in the form of a 0.2% diversion of employer state unemployment taxes for admin support to cover federal funding shortfalls, from which $6 million annually is deposited in the training fund, job training fund. The department offers a variety of services to claimants and job seekers and employers in 12 full-service offices and 2 itinerant offices located throughout the state. Therefore, personnel costs and benefit costs comprise the largest portion of our overall budget. While services are currently being provided virtually, we're working hard to transition back to in-person services and are confident we're going to be able to open our offices in the not too distant future. It's worth noting is our current 2021 adjusted authorized budget is now near 66 million versus 40 million in your packet, as NHES continues to receive above base and supplemental federal funding to assist with the continued elevated workloads and necessary computer system enhancements. Personnel costs comprise approximately 50% of our budget, 57% of our budget. When unemployment claims increase has been experienced during the pandemic, we receive additional funding, federal funding, based on workloads in excess of our base budget. A growing economy and low unemployment rate, like New Hampshire was experienced prior to the pandemic, results in decreased funding for NHES. To put this into context, at the start of the FY 12-13 biennium, the total number of staff at the department was 453, while at the start of the FY 2021 biennium, total number of staff was down to 249. Prior to the pandemic, NHES had the lowest staffing levels going back at least 40 years. And the pandemic hit so quick that it impacted the state's workforce. The department did not have time to hire additional staff in order to meet the growing demand. So what we ended up doing at the beginning of the pandemic, staff worked overtime, the equivalent of 95 additional positions in the initial months of the pandemic in order to handle the sudden and drastic increase of workloads, which meant all staff were working 7 days a week in order to meet the demand. Just to give you a sense, prior to the pandemic, initial claims were around 600 initial claims a week, and continued claims were around 4,000 a week. By the beginning of May, that jumped to 40,000 initial claims a week and 116,000 continued claims. The staff at the department have made incredible sacrifices and continue to do so, working long hours in order to meet the needs of the citizens of our state. Understanding that such expectations from our workforce are only realistic in the short term, we made the decision to increase staffing levels during the summer of 2020 when workloads were expected to decline. We filled 59 vacancies since the beginning of the pandemic, and 35 positions remain in active recruitment. We've also utilized external resources with first the National Guard, which assisted us greatly, provided tremendous assistance to us, and currently an outside vendor. We've received over 1 million calls during the pandemic and have handled this with a combination of outside resources and our own internal staff. The Department of Information Technology costs about approximately 11% of our overall budget. The Job Training Fund receives $6 million annually, which represents 12% of our budget. And NHES relies heavily on technology to administer all the programs, but most importantly, the unemployment insurance program. Therefore, in addition to Class 27, our software equipment and equipment-related maintenance budget represents approximately 10% of the budget. The remaining 10% of our budget is comprised of general operating expenses. The department submitted a budget of $14,490,810 for FY 2022 and $15,323,820 for FY 23 in the category of personal services for permanent classified and unclassified staff. This includes 286 classified, of which 15 are unfunded this biennium and 7 unclassified positions. The department also included 26 full-time temporary and 35 part-time positions in our budget. The Unemployment Comp Trust Fund, it's currently at $103 million. This current balance includes the $50 million deposit to the trust fund from the State CARES Act. And to put this in perspective, the balance was approximately $300 million at the beginning of the pandemic. NHES has paid out approximately $318 million in state UI benefits during the pandemic. And as NHES administers both state and federal unemployment programs, we've paid out $1.8 billion in total benefits, the majority of which was through federally funded supplemental assistance programs. Based upon our current trust fund forecast, we currently anticipate the trust fund will remain solvent through calendar year 2021. But this again includes many assumptions, and we need to be cautious with forecasting during these unprecedented times. There are currently 22 states borrowing from the Treasury in order to pay benefits, including Mass and Connecticut here in New England. Regarding proposals in House Bill 2, the first such proposal involves changes to the sections of state law that adjust employer tax rates in order to maintain the solvency of the Unemployment Comp Trust Fund. Currently, the manner in which the revenue is generated into the trust fund, we ask the least of employers when they can most afford it, like during periods of economic growth and low unemployment, and the most of employers when they can least afford it, like during an economic downturn or a pandemic. This series of amendments seeks to reverse this upside down dynamic. First, by eliminating the tax surcharges that drive up the employer tax rates during times when they can least afford it, like during the Great Recession or the pandemic. These surcharges are only needed because of solvency controls allowing the fund to grow to the predetermined point of solvency are set too low. Second, these amendments increase the second and third of the trust fund solvency thresholds, ultimately allowing the fund to grow to $400 million rather than the current limit of $300 million before employers receive the maximum reduction to their unemployment tax rate. We're confident that if these changes had been implemented prior to the recession, New Hampshire would not have needed to borrow the $120 million we borrowed from the federal treasury in order to pay benefits. And if implemented prior to the pandemic, we would have avoided the trust fund needing $50 million from the CARES Act flex funds. We shouldn't be able to rely on some outside source of funds to save the trust fund during the next downturn. The first threshold would remain unchanged, providing tax relief when the fund grows to $250 million. The second threshold would be increased from $275 million to $350 million, and the third threshold would be increased from $300 million to $400 million. By setting these top thresholds at a higher trust fund balance, then we eliminate the need to implement surcharges when the trust fund falls, because we'll have allowed the fund to grow to a sufficient level to achieve solvency. The second proposal contained in House Bill 2 involves the department, is found on section 302. This section was requested by the department and supported by the governor and was amended to House Bill 2 by the House. This section seeks to amend the section of unemployment comp statute that deals with confidentiality in order to allow the department to participate in USDOL's Integrity Data Hub. This is a collaborative effort of all states supervised by USDOL and NASWA, which is the National Association of State Workforce Agencies, to allow states to help each other in order to better detect and prevent identity theft fraud. There's no cost to the state to participate. We retain ownership and control of all the data, and our data never gets provided to another state. However, there will be IT development costs, and all of the IT development costs will be paid by the federal grant dollars received specifically for this purpose. If this is approved as part of the budget, it will be one of the many tools we will use to protect and preserve the trust fund going forward, so that only legitimate claimants and not criminals using stolen identities will be paid benefits. The department's done remarkably well during the pandemic in detecting and preventing payment to ID theft claims. We have detected and prevented payment to over 99% of the cases, having shut down over 27,000 attempts. While the country has lost billions of dollars to ID theft, New Hampshire's managed to prevent payment in all but 150 attempts and has managed to keep losses to 443,000, split evenly between state and federal programs out of the 1.8 billion in benefits paid during the pandemic. We know that we need to continue to strengthen integrity defenses in order to continue to successfully keep these criminals out of our unemployment system. And with that, I conclude my remarks, and we look forward to the next biennium and continuing to provide essential services to the people and businesses of New Hampshire.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. Does your budget request or the budget contain any funds for the Granite Workforce Program in the next biennium? And if so, where?
Hey, Senator Rosenwald, this is Deputy Commissioner Lavers. Thank you for the question. So the budget does not include any funding for Granite Workforce. The program that the department currently operates is out of the Job Training Fund that is in some ways similar to the program with Granite Workforce, where we utilize the expanded Job Training Fund that was created by the legislature in 2019, where we do provide support for individuals through training stipends, hiring incentives, and childcare and transportation subsidies to help transition them and find a pathway into the workforce. So in that regard, it's similar. We focus that on Medicaid recipients and Medicaid expansion recipients. So it's under the Job Training Fund. It has nothing to do with a requirement on Medicaid recipients. This is a voluntary program that's available to them.
Thank you.
Further questions? Just a question, the IDH, is that something that's going to require more data collection than you're getting now?
No, Mr. Chairman, that will, the data collection that we do right now, when someone files their initial claim and their weekly claims, that will stay the same. But what it allows is that as some of those, what we've seen with the increase in identity theft, that many of those identities or pieces of identities are utilized in multiple states. So that when there's a detection of a problematic IP address that's used, or an email address, or a social security number from another state, we then become aware of it through the Integrity Data Hub, and then we're able to shut it down on our own. So it's not increased data collection, it's better using the data that we currently receive from individuals that apply for benefits.
Okay, thank you. And if I understood correctly in the presentation, you were going to increase the thresholds on the trust fund. And the reasoning behind it was that if they had the higher thresholds, that there would not be need to borrow from the federal government. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And what I think that falls back on the employers now would end up having to pay the higher amount until for a longer period of time than normal. Is that correct?
So the second and third thresholds would be increased, as the commissioner had discussed, so that the first reduction to employer rates that occurs at 250 million, that would continue, and that the second and third reductions that trigger the 1% reduction and then the 1.5% reduction, those would be delayed, allowing the fund to grow to a more sufficient balance so that during the downturn, there is not a need to have surcharges on rates. So right now, if we didn't have the 50 million of CARES Act flex funds that the governor deposited into the trust fund, employers would be paying at a full 1% surcharge on their earned experience-based tax rate. They're not right now. So what this allows is that the fund to grow to a sufficient level to support the next downturn, so that when employers are hit with that next downturn, they lose their reductions, but we don't hit them with surcharges. So it's really a matter of timing on when you want the employers to pay to grow the fund, so that you don't have to borrow from the feds and incur that additional liability or rely upon an unknown outside funding source like we did this time with the CARES Act flex funds.
Okay. And while understanding what you're trying to accomplish, has any analysis been done as to the impact upon businesses that are trying to get back on their feet? with a continued amount going out as opposed to waiting until time is better and the economy has come back some before imposing more or a longer period of time to get to the levels that you're looking for?
The analysis that we have done here in our Economic and Labor Market Information Bureau, the changes that are being proposed would not be felt by employers for between 3 to 5 years out, where the trust fund right now is at about 103 million. It's going to take some time to grow to get the fund back to that first threshold level that triggers a reduction in rates to 250. But we're still looking at 3 to 5 years before the impact on employers. And in the meantime, the employers would not have the additional surcharges on their rates that act as a disincentive to hiring right now because it increases the employer's cost per employee.
Thank you. And I think I saw a release put out by the department recently that we have unemployment at 3%.
Correct.
And can you tell me individuals, what the number of unemployed are?
Currently
Yeah.
go ahead, Rich. Go ahead.
We're currently at about 37,000 individuals that are filing for benefits, either in the state or the federal programs. So there's about 23,000 individuals in the state unemployment program. And the balance of that are individuals that are either in the pandemic program, so they've had to remove themselves from the workforce due to a CARES Act created reason, or they're in the extended program. They've exhausted state UI and are in the extended weeks provided under the CARES Act. So that's where we are currently at right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Senator D'Alessandro,
I think Senator Guida was first. Go ahead. Then I'll take it.
you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll defer. Senator Guida, I think, had his hand up first, and then I'll take it.
Okay, Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rich, thanks for the outstanding job you and the department have done, and Commissioner as well. My question is this: if we're raising these thresholds to 300 and 400 million, right? Are we still not going to require businesses to pay more as the fund gets depleted at a time when they're still hurting? So it's not going to solve that problem. Really, what's going to solve is the problem of the interest we're paying to the federal government. It's still going to cause businesses to pay out more as, if you will, the fund declines during tough times. Is that correct?
So what would happen with these changes, Senator, is that right now employers are in essentially neutral, right? There aren't surcharges on their rates, and there aren't reductions to their rates either. They're paying at their earned experience-based amount. With these changes, they would still receive their reduction when we get to the $250 million level. But instead of getting the 1% reduction at 275 million, that would be delayed until 350 million. And the 1.5% reduction would be delayed until 400 million. So they would receive less a reduction for a time period in order for the fund to grow to those levels. And I think what it comes down to is a matter of timing. When do you want to ask that from employers? The way it's currently set up with the solvency controls, we would be asking more of them right now at a time when many are looking to start rehiring. We would be making the hiring of each individual more expensive. And the concern is that would undermine the ability to get our economy back going to where we were a short while ago. And we don't want to create that disincentive. So it's a matter of timing when we ask that from the business community, because it's the business community that supports and creates the entire amount in the trust fund from which state benefits get paid.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern, it's probably my inability to express it, is that are those 400 and 300 million triggers for increased rates as opposed to surcharges?
Those are to trigger reductions to rates.
Right, but going the other way, Rich, right? If the economy goes south, right now the draw on the trust fund goes up. So those amounts go down. They're going to get triggered at a higher level into losing those reductions as the revenues in the fund decline. Is that not correct?
Well, a part of this proposal would eliminate the surcharges. So as the fund currently falls, there are 2 half-point surcharges that increase rates, and this proposal would eliminate both of those.
Thank you.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Rich. Rich, in your narrative, you talked about the adjusted authorized at 66 million rather than 40. That's 26 million more. How is that accounted for? And does that move forward? And where does that occur in your budget going forward? Because as I look at this, you've got no changes in the budget, in the governor's presented budget, than the House budget. So where's that 26 million? How was that spent?
Yeah, and Senator, thank you for the question. I have Jill Revels here, our budget administrator, will be able to talk as well. The additional funding from the federal government is comprised of 2 sources. One is what they refer to as above base funds. These are dollars that are paid to the states based upon their increased unemployment claim volume. So as those dollars come in, we then seek accept and expend approval for those, and then we allocate those amongst our classes as appropriate. A lot of that goes to personnel and overtime, as the commissioner had articulated, with the increased overtime needs during the pandemic, and then our increased staffing. The other area that we receive additional federal dollars are in the form of SBRs, or supplemental budget requests. These are funds that the USDOL makes available to states to apply for in order to achieve a targeted objective. Right now, funds are being provided for states to be able to increase their integrity controls within their unemployment systems. That's where the SBR dollars have been coming in. That's part of what the Integrity Data Hub is about. So the increased funding that we receive is both those above base funds and then those SBR funds, and then they get utilized within our personnel classes and our hardware and software classes. And Jill, if you could talk a little bit about timing, is there?
Sure, correct. Thank you. My name is Jill Revels, Business Administrator for the Department of Employment Security. I echo exactly what Deputy Commissioner said. The bulk of the funds were for the extra staffing levels that were required to handle the claims load, as well as significant system enhancements necessary to administer the benefits. We did, through accept and expend action, add to the adjusted authorized budget for 2021. This all happened after the budget documents were in place. Those funds are good through, many of the funds were to support unfunded positions, which we are asking to be funded in this budget. So they're carrying the positions through the end of June, which then will become part of our budget. We do have a good portion of those funds that will be carried forward through contracts, through a contract with our system, our IT vendor of the New Hampshire Unemployment Benefit System, in order to continue to perform necessary enhancements to the system to accommodate the continued changes to benefit programs.
Further question?
Follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. So of the 26 million dollars that you used it for IT and you used it for overtime. And how moving forward are you going to handle that in your ask for the next biennium? I mean, obviously you're a totally federally funded program. So how is that accounted for as you move forward?
So it's also in the additional staffing, Senator, as well. So the positions which we've filled, and then the additional positions that we're currently seeking to fill, and then also the positions in the full-time temporary and part-time classes that we're seeking approval to be able to fill as needed going forward. So it would be for our increased staffing, our continued overtime costs, and the additional software and hardware costs that have been associated with the funds that we've received from U.S. Department of Labor. A lot of that not only on the integrity side of increased or enhancing our ability to detect and prevent fraud, but they've also provided a significant amount of software and hardware money with regard to all of the programs that they've rolled out. So you think of PUA and PEUC and the FPUC program. There's been associated dollars made available both on the administrative side for staffing and on the increased software and hardware costs associated with all of those as we've gone through the pandemic.
Follow up.
Follow up?
So your major ask is the House Bill 2 language, as far as changes in your budget are concerned. Is that correct?
I think the two items that involve us in House Bill 2 are both significant and would have big impacts going forward. And we think they're certainly with the IDH participation helps with preventing identity theft, fraud, and certainly on the trust fund side, we think that these suggestions that the governor proposed in House Bill 2 go a long way to help stabilize the fund and to better align the ask of employers with the economic cycles that we find ourselves in, rather than asking too much of them during a time like we're in right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members.
Next presentation was with the Public Employees Labor Relations Board. Good afternoon, Doug.
Good afternoon. Am I coming through okay?
Nice and loud. Yep.
Okay. The mute button is showing up on my end, but I'll ignore it. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and senators of the Finance Committee. My name is Doug Ingersoll. I'm the Director and Counsel for the Public Employee Labor Relations Board. I've given you a brief handout, which gives a pretty comprehensive overview of our operations. We are responsible for administering the state's public sector collective bargaining law, and we have approximately 650 bargaining units at the state, city, county, and municipal level. We get our work done through the assistance of a per diem board. Currently, we have 6 active members, and we also have 4 full-time employees, myself included, 1 other staff attorney, and 2 support staff. In terms of the past year, we have been, the staff at least, have been in person since June 2020. However, we have been conducting all our proceedings via video, and it's a system which has worked fairly well. It gets the job done, but it has its flaws. And I'm hopeful that over the course of the summer coming up, we can transition back to normal in-person proceedings. It's my intention, at least preliminarily, to try to cue off of what the state courts are doing on that same topic. In terms of demand for our services, the demand has been pretty steady, a little more intense over the last 9 months. And we have had a number of cases which were COVID-based or COVID-related. And most of those cases have already worked their way through our docket. And so I'm hopeful that going forward, we'll start to see issues which don't have any connection to COVID, but I guess that remains to be seen. In terms of the overall budget, there is no difference between the governor's budget and the House budget. So there's nothing for me to address there. In terms of our 22-23 budget versus 21 authorized, essentially what's in the House and the governor's budget is what we need to continue operations at our current level. The increases are primarily in the benefits category. There are some mild increases and decreases in some other areas, but nothing of any particular significance. And that is, in a nutshell, an overview of our budget, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Senator D'Alessandro.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You said the demand for your services is up. Tell me what that entails. And
Well, I'm speaking in terms of our docket and the caseload. There was certainly a brief 8 to 10 weeks hiatus beginning in the March, April time period. We had a number of cases with the state where the representatives from the Attorney General's office had been repurposed to other responsibilities and duties. And then we also suspended our hearings for a period of 60 days, anticipating a return to normal docket activity in June of 2020, which didn't happen. And then we transitioned to the video format. So we kind of generated our own increase in work demand. And then there were some additional COVID-related cases that came in, which were fairly novel. And certainly at the state level, as you may know, there has been some difficulties in getting some of the state contracts settled, which has spun off some cases here. So at this point, we have addressed most of that docket, and we are fairly current going forward.
for the question,
Follow-up?
is your membership full? Are all 9 members, are they filled at this point?
No, so currently we have 6 active members, 2 each with management experience, 2 each with labor experience, and 2 chairs. So we have 3 alternate chair vacancies. However, I haven't had any difficulty getting staffing as needed for cases with the current 6 members. The permanent board size is 5 members. So we have all 5 permanent members in place and 1 extra.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Doug.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
Too.
Next, we'll recognize Commissioner Jasper with the Department of Agriculture, Markets, and Food.
I think I'm here now.
You are.
Sorry about that. Things transitioned a little, was a little difficult. So good afternoon, Chairman Daniels, members of the Senate Finance Committee. I am Sean Jasper, Commissioner of the Department of Agriculture, Markets, and Food. So as you know, the governor gave us targets for our budget for FY22 and 23. We came in the first year, and this was relative to the general fund, of course, 106,000 below target in the first year, and about $66,000 in the second year. We did have a list of prioritized needs or wants. The governor and the House have both put those into the budget. But in total, because of some other adjustments that we were able to make, we still end up being a department that is essentially revenue neutral to the general fund because of the revenues that we send along. So as a matter of course, generally we're a little bit revenue positive, even though our budgets don't reflect that at the beginning of the year because of additional revenues and, of course, lapses. We end up being a positive operation to the general fund. So this year, one of the important things that we need is a statutory change, which is included in House Bill 2 to allow us to transition to fund more of our pesticides division to be funded through the Integrated Pest Management Fund, which only makes sense. We retain 25% of that income, and that account has actually been growing. So we would like to be able to fund some of our positions using some of those funds. It will still leave us with a healthy balance and plenty of money to support the grants that are requested from that fund. The other thing that we have done on a temporary basis is to use more of the fund balance within the product and scale testing fund to fund our operations by reducing some expenses and increasing personnel budgeting into that area. This is not sustainable much beyond this current biennium. We would certainly have to look at that, but obviously it was a high priority to keep the department fully staffed. We just came within, I think, one full-time position of being fully staffed when the pandemic hit. We're down a few positions currently. One is still being not filled purposely to help meet our lapses, and others are being advertised right now. The important thing that came in late to the Senate, the House did not see it, was we learned that there is a need to have someone to do data entry relative to brucellosis testing in cattle. The federal government had been doing that data entry. Unfortunately, the person who was doing it retired, and they opted not to fill that position. If we're not able to do the data entry, milk cannot flow out of the state of New Hampshire from our dairy farms. So this is a low entry position, $53,000 with benefits in the first year and $56,000 in the second year. So that's the additional request that we have. You have all that data. Hopefully you've seen it. And I guess rather than just going on, I'd rather answer your questions with the time we have remaining.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Commissioner Jasper? Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. Sean, good to see you.
Good to see you, Senator.
You may recall within the last year before the pandemic, there were some discussions regarding bittersweet and the extensive problem that is causing to vegetation in our state. Would you be amenable to some form of adding personnel? I know they're very restricted in the number of personnel you have available to deal with such invasive species. Could you speak to that?
Yes, what I can tell you is that just before the pandemic started, we were putting a working group together in cooperation primarily with Cooperative Extension to come up with a plan and come forward. And we were anticipating to come forward in this budget with some funding, but obviously the pandemic put a halt to that. So at this point, what I'd really rather do is be able to transition back to working with that group and coming up with a plan, even if it was something that we would come forward with next year. But we have had a great deal of cooperation with towns, conservation commissions, and trying to come up with a statewide plan to address it. We think we can do it pretty efficiently. And we do have personnel within the department who are working on that. I will tell you the Department of Transportation has been extremely helpful in allowing us to train their personnel to deal with a lot of these issues. But certainly this is a top priority for us because these invasive species really have been taking over the state. But I don't think we're ready to actually include something in the budget right now. We've got to get back to trying to plan this out. But I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick follow-up, Sean. Can we read that as a commitment to be concluded with the study or the research that you're doing before the next year so that we can look at potential legislation this coming fall?
I am certainly hopeful. I'm not driving that bus. We have decided that the best lead agency on this would actually be Cooperative Extension. And so I've got to get back with them. Obviously, everything else going on, we haven't had any conversations in almost a year on that. I will commit to you that I will get back in touch with them and that we'll start working on that. And I would hope that we could have a bill in place if needed. I can't prejudge what the results are going to be, but I want to get that back on track as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further questions? Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sean, great to see you.
Good to see you.
The
Senator.
veterinary clinic that in conjunction with UNH, how is that going? Is that still servicing and still functioning?
They have been doing a great job, and there's been a lot of conversations with the state and with the university, and now there may be some federal funding opportunities for that facility, but it is remained up and running, doing a great job, and we are looking at some further expansion of what they're doing that would not involve state funds. It would be funded through the feds, and I think we've got some real opportunities there for some revenue growth and for better service for the people of the state of New Hampshire and some of the surrounding states, because a lot of things have to be sent down to Cornell. And we're hopeful that if the opportunities we see come to fruition, we'll be able to be providing some of those services.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Commissioner. Have a
Thank
great
you.
afternoon.
You too.
Yes, if he's on. Okay, we're going to skip down and take up the Department of Labor. Welcome, Commissioner Merrifield. Good afternoon, Commissioner. And you are muted.
Hi, Senator. Can you hear me?
Here we go. Yes.
Sorry about that. I think we were both trying to unmute me.
It doesn't work that well.
No. So shall I begin?
You may.
Okay. Senators, thank you for this opportunity to present our 22-23 budget. For the record, I am Ken Merrifield, Commissioner at the Department of Labor. I hope to be joined at some point during the presentation by Deputy Commissioner Rudy Ogden, who's on another call, but I am in the same room with our CFO, Amy O'Hara, who, if you would like, you'd be welcome to promote her to the conversation. If you are using, I believe you're using the compare budget, and if that is the case, then we begin on page 378, or if you're using House Bill 1, we begin on page 179. But I have just some introductory remarks. The Department of Labor consists of 3 operating divisions: administration, which is inclusive of department-wide efforts, including human resources and finance. It also includes the inspection division, which is tasked with the enforcement of the state's employment, safety, elevator and pressure vessel statutes. And finally, the workers' compensation division, which is tasked with monitoring the state's worker compensation system. In each of the last 3 fiscal years, the inspection division has recovered in excess of $1 million in wages for New Hampshire employees. It's completed an average of 750 labor inspections and completed roughly 10,000 boiler or pressure vessel inspections and over 5,000 elevator inspections. The division is also proactive, training approximately 2,500 employers per year on employment law to assist businesses with their compliance. 20 and 21 being an obvious exception, as the public health emergency forced cancellation of in-person training during the spring months when we usually conduct those trainings. The division did develop, however, and conduct remote electronic training, and we continue to offer this service to employers now and in the future. Among other duties, the Workers' Compensation Division collects first reports of injury from employers and insurance carriers in New Hampshire regarding the roughly 30 to 40,000 workplace injuries that occur each year. It conducts over 1,500 formal hearings per year in a typical year, and manages non-appropriated revolving trust fund collections and payments approaching $20 million per year, which, to give you some idea of the scope of that, that's about double the size of the entire operating budget of the department. While the department's total appropriations are funded 100% by agency income, that revenue is derived through 2 distinct sources: the administration fund and the restricted fund. The administration fund is described in RSA 281A:59, and it comes from a pro rata assessment of the department's annual budget for worker compensation activities that is levied on workers' compensation insurance carriers and self-insured entities in New Hampshire. The restricted fund is described in RSA 273:1B, and it comes from the sum of all other fees, licenses, certificates, and civil penalties of the department. And the balance remaining, notably in the restricted fund, is transferred to the general fund at the conclusion of each fiscal year after our worker compensation operating costs are paid. So we are a general fund contributor each year at about $1 million to $2 million a year. 2 years ago, the Labor Department documented a new cost allocation plan so that the burden on either of these 2 revenue sources, the administration fund or the restricted fund, would be traceable to measurable statistics from our operation. And I owe some credit to Amy here. She's a recent arrival from the Department of Health and Human Services and got me thinking about different accounting strategies that we were familiar with at HHS. And so we've continued to improve on that cost allocation model in this new budget request. A number of expenses that were previously budgeted within each division have actually now been centralized in the administration division because that division is funded already by a statistical allocation method that, and this change will facilitate, we think, business office functions. It'll reduce duplicative purchasing and also, we believe, generate additional dollars for our general fund contribution as the fund mix in administration is more favorable to the state. The governor's office provided an overall expense target of $9.5 million in year one, which represented a 10% decrease from our current adjusted authorized for 2021. The adjusted year two target was also about $670,000 lower than our current operating budget this year. We met both of those targets with our efficiency budget request. And if you were to look at which lines were most heavily impacted by that, it was predominantly salaries, benefits, DOIT transfers, and post-retirement benefits that were impacted by that efficiency budget. In addition to our decision to add no new positions for 22 or 23, we also defunded 18 out of our 92 full-time classified positions. And as you might imagine, this did remove significant staffing flexibility, but the department has been running with a 20% vacancy rate in recent years, and we believe that we will be able to operate normally. One position was restored actually in the governor and House budgets, and DOIT staffing had been reduced from 5 full-time direct staff to 2 full-time direct staff, but also one of those positions was restored in both the governor and House budgets. Both the governor and the House approved all 5 priority needs that we identified. And in total, the House approved 22 budget shows a reduction of $463,000 from current year adjusted authorized. And the House approved 23 budget shows roughly $407,000 increase over year one. We will be planning to launch a new on-base document management system this spring to replace a legacy system that's some 20 years old. So we hope to launch that this spring or summer and expect to realize some operational improvements as a result of that. What we feel we need in the new biennium, more than deeper staffing, is operational flexibility, and that's what we've attempted to provide for in our 22-23 request. Both the governor and House budgets have included, as I say, prioritized needs we asked for, and significantly for technology funding. And this is intended to allow us to migrate away from what I've been told will be the last AS400 IBM mainframe in state government. So that's a big goal of ours in 22-23. And that really concludes my remarks, and Amy and I will be happy to try and take questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any questions? Senator D'Alessandro?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner,
Yes, Senator.
Are you still running a 20% vacancy rate?
We are, and actually I ran these numbers yesterday in anticipation of a question about that. We're actually at 28% vacancy right now, but honestly, that is more due to current recruiting status on certain positions. I expect that when current recruitment is completed, we'll be back at that level of about 20 or so percent vacancy.
Follow-up?
Follow-up?
In DOT, you look at, you're asking for a significant increase in DOT spending. What about the down? You authorized 5 positions, you only have 2, and you're basically getting $1 million increase. Who's going to function in running that?
Yeah, as I mentioned in my remarks, we actually requested a 3rd position as a prioritized need, and that was granted by the governor and the House. So we'll have 3 of the 5, and honestly, the other 2 positions have been vacant for some time. One of them has been vacant for multiple years. So we've been running without that position at least for some time.
Just to follow up?
Follow up.
So if you've had a position that's vacant for multiple years and you're asking for a huge increase in spend, why don't you just eliminate that position? If it's been vacant for all that time, you must be compensating in some fashion. And is
Right.
that compensation going to be enough to handle this huge influx in terms of the spend?
Well, the spend is really related to contract with the vendor that is implementing the system and purchasing new modules for that system. But with regard to the position that's been vacant for some time, the reason that it's not funded is because DOIT is taking it back. They have taken the position out of the Labor Department.
Oh, okay, just a follow-up. So in other words, you had a guy from IT who was assigned to your department, but that person has been withdrawn and put back over to IT?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome. Further questions? Noting that you had mentioned that there were 30 to 40,000 workplace injuries per year. What is the department doing to see if that rate of injuries can be brought down?
It actually was significantly less in the last fiscal year. I think if you were to refer to our handout, there was a drop of about 10,000 workplace injuries reported to us last year. Now I think that probably had a great deal to do with the pandemic. If people are working from home, if there's less traffic on the roads, businesses under great deal of stress, they're probably not thinking first and foremost about their reporting requirements to us, would be my fear. So I think that for a lot of factors, which I can only guess at, the number of injuries reported to us declined very significantly. But the number of injuries in the state, workplace injuries in the state, is pretty stable at 40,000 a year for a long time.
Okay, as the economy continues to recover, and we may see a difference in change in a business model, would you expect that the number of injuries would decrease because more people would be working from home?
Yeah, I would certainly expect that to be one impact of remote work for sure. And it does, however, beg the question too, what will employer responsibilities look like in the future if a significant part of the workforce is working at home? Will injuries nonetheless occur, and what's the employer's responsibility for those sorts of injuries? I think that long term, we have seen the number of injuries in the workplace decline over a very long period of time, and I think that probably has to do with the change of the general economy away from industrial type accidents to a more information-based economy.
Okay. I think it might be also interesting to determine if somebody is hurt at home, how does it become a workplace injury versus non-workplace as well?
Right. It's going to be a fascinating world.
Are you keeping up to timely hearings?
Yes. We have been almost from the beginning of the public health crisis. We have been offering remote hearings. I was just speaking with the hearings administrator yesterday. Apparently, we only have 3 cases where folks are insisting on an in-person hearing to be held here. And so we're looking forward to the end of the public health crisis where we can, get folks in an environment that is safe but in person for those cases, but it's a tiny number of cases. So we have been able to keep up with the hearings process, the adjudicative process that we're responsible for managing here.
Okay. And I have one final question.
Sure.
And this has to do with businesses, particularly new businesses, understanding labor laws. And I know that in the past, we had a problem that people were coming in and being fined hundreds of thousands of dollars. And as it turned out, that they didn't know or understand the law. Are we still seeing that dynamic? Or I know at one time the department was giving out CDs with the labor laws on them so that new business owners could know what the labor laws were. Where are we on that?
Yeah, that's very much the case. We have, until the public health crisis, we were continuing to conduct live in-person sessions for hundreds of employers at a time all around the state, different geographic regions of the state, and providing them with the electronic copies that you mentioned. Those are also available here. We also try to conduct, as I mentioned, we have shifted the model somewhat to remote webinars to train. In fact, some of those were taking place today from the building. So I think that that's a real improvement in our employer education model. It's our intent to do more of that in the future. Really, the penalties that the department can assess are really just a tool for compliance. We're really much more interested in compliance and educating employers about the laws that affect them than penalizing. And I would go further and just say that a lot of the statutes in recent years have been changed to insist that we issue warnings first rather than penalties. So I would hope that that would also assist a new business in New Hampshire from suffering ill effects just because they weren't aware.
Thank you. Any further questions for the commissioners? Senator Gaida?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner Ken. Good to see you again.
Good.
Sort of.
Well, I apologize for that. I can't find how to turn on my camera.
So I'm looking at the workers' comp division statistics at the bottom of page 6 of the handout.
Yes, sir.
And substantial increase year over year, 18, 19, 20 in the civil penalties. Can you shed some light on what's causing that?
Yeah, if it's yes, okay, I see that statistic now. And just for grins, I was asked this question earlier today by the legislative budget assistant who is here for an audit right now. And the truth is we had noticed extreme volatility in that line, in that type of revenue here at the department. And a new division director was named in the 18-19 time period. And we had also another recruit from another state agency that became assistant director. And they really dug into this particular type of penalty and the process. And what we had found is that there were less collections and much more volatility happening in that line than had historically been the case. And so they investigated what was happening there. A personnel change was made, and we're finding that line now in 2021 is rising up to the level that we actually had collected historically. It has historically been the largest revenue source in the workers' comp division.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ken, where do those revenues go from those penalties?
Any penalty, any certificate, any license fee, all of those go into the restricted fund. And as I mentioned in my remarks, following our costs being paid that are not associated with workers' compensation, those go to the general fund.
Thanks very much.
Sure.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Commissioner.
Absolutely. My pleasure. I'll try. Good to see you all.
And the committee will be in recess for 5 minutes. Committee will come to order. Our next presentation is by Fish and Game. And so we have multiple people. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Good afternoon. I am the Executive Director, Scott Mason, and I have with me Kathy Levante, our Business Manager, and Colonel Jordan from Law.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And Director, if I can just ask, when you speak, get right up on the microphone because it's having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, okay.
Let's all move forward.
Okay. All right, we'll recognize whoever's going to do the presentation.
I will do a split presentation. Mission statement for New Hampshire Fish and Game. As guardian of the New Hampshire Fish and Wildlife and Marine Resources, the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department works in partnership with the public to conserve, manage, and protect these resources and their habitats. Inform and educate the public about these resources and provide the public with opportunities to use and appreciate these resources. Due to COVID-19, more and more people have chosen to recreate in the out of doors. This year, we've seen an increase in almost every service we provide to the people of New Hampshire. Like all state agencies, we have tightened our budget due to the economic impacts that COVID is having on our state resources. It will be very hard for us to meet all of the historic needs and those increased needs that citizens are currently asking for with this proposed budget. While I've only been here for a few short months, it has become very apparent to me in this short period, the department is critically resource challenged from both a personnel side and a financial side. We have 192 full-time authorized positions, including myself. This budget includes 9 unfunded positions, including 4 conservation officers, 2 biologists, and 2 staff in our public affairs division and our landowner relations coordinator. Each and every one of these positions are crucial to our mission. Fairly recently, our inland fisheries division chief resigned, and it came to my attention that after his promotion in 2013, he'd continued to do the duties of his old position of supervisor of the hatcheries, as well as performing his duties as chief. His departure has increased the pressure on our department as we look to solve the issues at our Powder Mill hatchery. We asked the House to amend our proposed budget to include a supervisor of the hatcheries position. They added this position to our budget. And in fiscal year 2020, we ended the year with $7.689 million in the Fish and Game Fund. Unusually high revenues in the spring of 2020 due to the pandemic has been recognized nationally. Currently, our fiscal year 2021 overall budget is $34 million. The fiscal budget for 22 and 23 is 33.94 million and 35.26 million respectively, keeping in mind that there's 27 pay periods for that year. General fund appropriations have helped the Fish and Game Fund over the last 4 bienniums. Our budget request has $600,000 each year, general fund, with $100,000 in match going to our non-game program, and $500,000 to law enforcement, AU 7887. The governor's budget director provided this figure of 1.2 million over the biennium for us. Kathy, do you have anything you wish to add, or?
Not really, but I am very available to answer any and all questions that are applicable to me.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. I think I know the answer to this, but can you talk about the increase or decrease, whatever it is, of licensing based on the pandemic? Have been seen any surge in purchases of licenses for hunting, fishing, or both?
Yes, I don't have, do you have the figures in front of you, Kathy? We have seen an increase in both hunting and fishing licenses. And the other issue that we have is a large large increase in registration on both ATVs and snow machines.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Senator Hennessy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to see you, Commissioner. On page 717 of the compare budget, can you tell me what line 304 research and management is?
2125 Wildlife Habitat Conservation, 304 Research and Management. We were asked the same question by House Division 2, and Mark Ellingwood, Chief of Wildlife, came in and joined us.
Excuse me, can you speak up, please?
I'm sorry. Want me to go get Mark?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna go get Mark Ellingwood, the Chief of the Wildlife Division, to join us so he can give you a complete answer to your question. Would that be okay?
Yeah, that would be fine. Senator
Thank you.
Senator Hennessy, what page are you on?
717.
707, thank you.
What was the line item you were questioning, Senator Hennessy?
304.
Seven. Well, while we're waiting on Kathy, Director, I noticed that your revenue is doing very well this year.
Yes.
And what will that be used for? Are there specific things you can use it for and that you can't use it for?
Yeah, 1 minute. Mark just joined us to answer Senator Hennessy's question.
Sit right here. There you go.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the question. I just left a commission meeting, so I'm a little on my heels here, but I understand you're asking about the use of Class 304 and Org 2155 for the habitat account. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. That account is largely used for state land management and maintenance. So it is largely focused on our management, maintenance, and operations on the 60,000 acres of wildlife management areas that we own in the state of Connecticut. Examples of its use might include things such as the establishment of gates, the maintenance of roads, the replacement of culverts, the placement of kiosks, informational materials, and the establishment of parking lots.
Follow up?
Thank you. Can you tell me why it increased so much over prior years? It looks like it might be federal funds.
That is the increase that Jim said to expand the program.
Yes, thank you. Now I recall now. It's been a while since we dealt with that specific budget, but it was expanded in large part because of a huge backlog of maintenance on those lands. We struggle to keep up with those properties as the use by the public intensifies, and in fact, it's largely our effort to address an accumulating backlog of work on those properties.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Senator Gaida?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that same page, I look at line 33 under land acquisitions and easements, and it basically triples from 20 to 21. Is that for projects that you're purchasing, or is that just to have funds available to purchase lands?
We move money into that account, federal money, almost exclusively based on land projects. And so it has a high balance because there was a significant amount of activity within that class line. I think of note to you would be the fact that what we do is we use past land purchases that did not involve federal funds. And that allows us to leverage additional federal funds that otherwise might be unspent that are available to us through the Fish and Wildlife Service.
Follow up. How many acres do you currently have under your existing land management?
I believe it's approximately 60,000 actual owned acres and an additional 20,000 or so in easements.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any further questions? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. I wasn't going to ask this, but I can't help myself. On page 714, could you please explain to me, who's a city girl, why pheasants need their own management program separate from other game?
Right. Yes, I can. Thank you for the question.
I'm just curious.
No, I'm glad that you're interested in what we do, so I'm glad to answer the question. Yes, you're welcome. There are dedicated license revenues that those hunters in the state who have an interest in pheasant contribute each year. Those monies are used to purchase pheasant from an out-of-state vendor for distribution on those suitable habitats that we own or that we partner with private landowners on. Essentially, the program covers its own costs, and the monies by statute are obligatorily committed to the purchase of those birds.
Could I just have a quick follow-up? Thank you.
Follow-up.
So are there other species of game that you do the same thing for?
No, it's unique to our pheasant program.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm glad to know that.
Further questions? And one of the questions I had asked Director is in the revenue that you gain in, which seems that you're doing very well this year, what can that revenue be used for, or what's it restricted from being used for?
Kathy, the extra revenue we're receiving, what are the restrictions?
Can't really hear you.
Could you repeat the question, please, sir?
Yes, from the revenue that you're getting in this year, which seems to be running very well, is that unrestricted revenue, or do you the things that you can use it for and things you cannot use it for?
License revenue, the majority of it is unrestricted and can be used for all operational activities. There are some components of those licenses, depending upon what license you buy, that is restricted. When you buy a fishing license, $1 of that fishing license goes into our fisheries habitat account, which is restricted. We have about 16 dedicated accounts that are restricted accounts.
And Senator, one of the larger increases that we've seen is in registrations, and a big percentage of that, do you know the breakdown
Of
what we keep versus what Dancer keeps?
It's approximately 72 to 75%.
About 75% of that income will transfer over to Dancer for their Trails Bureau. So a lot of that money will disappear out of our hands and head over there.
But 100% of that money that we keep here is dedicated. It is not unrestricted.
Okay, and I didn't catch the 75% was transferred to where?
DNCR.
What is that?
Department of Natural and Cultural Resources.
Okay, thank you.
Trails Bureau.
Okay, any further questions? Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 739 in the summary, total expenses and total funds. As I look at total funds, I know over the past few years that the department has been struggling and that we've started giving general funds. I note that that's coming down. Do you anticipate that ever going to zero?
The need for general funds?
Yes.
I don't in the foreseeable future. The issue comes up is we have a lot of duties that have been assigned to us that we don't have a way to recapture the expense of those duties and or the cost of doing those duties. And what ends up happening is we end up transferring funds from, the hunters and fishermen in New Hampshire are subsidizing some of the other duties that we have to go forward with.
Okay. Follow up. Can you talk a little bit about rescue, SAR, and so forth, and what kind of expenses you're seeing with respect to that?
Have you direct a question to Colonel Jordan with us today?
Good afternoon. I'll move a little closer so you can hear me. So we average about 190 missions a year. And we're over the last 10 years, I just finished looking back at all the statistics of that, and that's averaging a cost of about $300,000 each year to conduct those missions. As I've said many times, that's an area that we had a funding source set up back in 1989 and has never increased since that time. The Hike Safe card was the only additional funding that was created, and that's done on a voluntary basis. While it's been pretty successful in bringing in $100,000, a little over $100,000 every year since we created it, it's very hard to set a budget to that, sir, based on what we hope will come in. So right now we're meeting for the first time in many years. We're very close to meeting those expenses, but I'm not able to make any succession planning for extra staff or extra equipment. We're kind of, right now we're covering the expenses, but we're not making any future plans or gains financially, if you will, based on the lack of funding in that. And that's another example of what the director just spoke about, is an unfunded mandate, basically.
Follow up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as I understand it, the law allows the department to recuperate from, quote, irresponsible, if you will, parties that cause SAR operations. Have you moved forward on any of those initiatives with rescues that were based on, if you will, the lack of preparation or the poor preparation of the individuals?
Yes, we bill each year. We're billing 11 to 12 missions that meet that standard of proof based on the approval of the on-scene commander, my review of it, and then the third step being at the Attorney General's office. And then we start to collect payment. I will tell you that has cost us money because we put ourselves in a position where we become a collection agency, which is not working well for us. We have about a 62% collection rate on that success rate. The other roadblock that I'm hitting is one tool that the legislator provided for us was if someone failed to pay that bill, we could then suspend their driver's license. Department of Motor Vehicle doesn't feel that we have the authority to do that, and they have stopped allowing us to do that. So the director of Motor Vehicle reached out to me just recently and asked me to go back to the Attorney General's office to try and get clarifying legislation to allow us to do that. So if we lose that tool, that is really the last ditch effort to get anyone to pay those bills. If I lose the ability of suspending their licenses, there's no incentive for folks to pay that. So it does cover the cost of reckless or outrageous behavior, if you will. Just understand that's a small percentage of what we're doing. A lot of what we're doing is accident related. People that are pretty well equipped that just in fact get hurt. We have a lot more people participating in it this past year, as you can imagine, with COVID. Everybody came outdoors and our calls increased. We had a huge spike this past year, which we expected going into the spring of the year. So those are some of the challenges we're facing. But you're correct. We do have the ability to bill. We do participate in that. We have about a 62% success rate. but we just recently lost my ability to suspend driver's license. So I'm going to be revisiting the legislature here as soon as I can to get that back.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Any further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you all for the presentation, and I wish you a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that concludes our business for the day. We will meet again on Friday at 1 o'clock, and I'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved by
Second.
Senator Gaida, that's seconded by Senator Hennessy. We'll call roll. Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator Gaida.
Yes.
Senator Reagan. Senator D'Alessandro. Senator Hennessy.
Yes.